So, 2 weeks ago, I made a video talking about BTCC's decision to ditch the hybrids for 100% sustainable fuels, which if you haven't seen yet, go check out in the card on the top right. Just over a week ago, however, there was huge news that came out in the world of WRC, along with some more news that came out at the beginning of November that piqued my interest. And given I made videos earlier this year that brought up these issues, I thought that just like with the BTCC video I made before my impromptu break, I would do a reaction video to these news stories. So let's start off with the one that broke on the 22nd of October, which is the change to the series' point system. So in news that probably won't shock anyone, it was announced after so much backlash that WRC would indeed be ditching the current point system from 2025 and would be replacing it with a more simplified point system that will be easier to understand. Now for anyone who doesn't watch WRC, you probably aren't aware of what the current point system entails and why it has been so controversial. Back in January, I made a video discussing this awful point system, but for anyone who hasn't watched that video, here's a little recap. Back in December 2023, it was announced that the WRC would have a major change to the point system, and it's safe to say that people at the time, including myself, were not very happy with this change. Even to the point where my own brother flat out decided not to watch the series this year simply because of how terrible the point system was. So what did this point system entail? Well, to put it simply, drivers no longer got points for where they finished in the rally, essentially nullifying the whole point of winning a rally. Instead, provided that they finished the rally, drivers were awarded points for where they were placed overall after Saturday's running, and then, along with the power stage points, were awarded bonus points for their overall times on Sunday, with the top 7 fastest Sunday drivers receiving the points. And because no points were being awarded for the overall result, it meant that there was a chance that the winner of the rally would not walk away with the most amount of points, which has been the case a few times this season, as in the 13 rallies that happened this year, 4 of them saw the winner of the rally not walk away with the most points. Now whilst you could look at that and say, well, most of the rallies this year saw the winner walk away with the most points, it doesn't detract from the fact that the possibility was still there. And regardless of whether the percentage ended up being low or not, the fact is, this should not have been happening in the first place. And it's even had the drivers being critical about it as well, with 8-time champion Sebastian Ogier being the most vocal when it came to this topic, although him losing the title this year, despite him being a part-time driver, had nothing to do with this BS point system. As much as I respect Ogier, him losing the title this year was down to him. Thankfully, however, it seems the FIA and WRC promoter have recognised that something needed to be changed, and thankfully, after so much speculation of whether they would ditch it or not, it seems they have actually listened to the fans. However, despite my joy that the controversial point system is thankfully being scrapped, there are a few things with this new system that I have issues with. Firstly, although the series is reverting back to the old top 10 point system that was used in 2023, which means that drivers will be awarded points for the overall result, the series will still be awarding bonus points. Whilst the Saturday points have thankfully been scrapped, the Sunday points, along with the power stage points, will still remain for 2025. Now whilst that might not sound like a bad thing, and personally speaking it isn't, the amount of points that you get from these two things is the thing I have a problem with. Unlike in 2024, where the top 7 Sunday drivers would receive points, from 2025, only the top 5 Sunday drivers will receive points, with the quickest driver receiving 5 points and the 5th fastest receiving 1 point. Now whilst that doesn't sound bad, when you take into account the amount of power stage points you get, which will be the same as what it was this year, it means that for the second year in a row, there is a slight chance that the winner of the rally won't walk away with the most amount of points. Whilst the winner of the rally will receive 25 points, the driver that finishes in second could still walk away with more points, as along with grabbing 18 points for finishing second, they could also end up being the fastest across the Sunday stages, which would give them 5 points, and then end up being the quickest on the power stage, which would give them another 5 points. Add those points together, and second place would walk away with 28 points, which is 3 more than what the winner would get if they ended up not finishing in the top 5 for both the Sunday stages and the power stage. Now, whilst it is an improvement on the previous point system, and I am grateful that it is, the fact that there is still a chance of this being a possibility doesn't sit right with me. And whilst admittedly there is less chance of that happening, unlike the previous system, the fact that there is still a chance still worries me. Now, I'm not saying that the series shouldn't have bonus points, in fact quite the opposite, but in my opinion, I do believe these bonus points need to be adjusted to completely rule out the possibility of the winning driver getting less points than another driver. In my opinion, I believe only the top 3 should be awarded points for both the Sunday stages and the power stage, with the fastest only receiving 3 points. That way, even if the second place driver does end up getting these bonus points, they won't end up getting more points than the overall winner. But that's my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion in the comments below. Overall, I am very glad that this point system that we have had this year is finally being scrapped, and we can finally put the whole saga to rest. And although I do have my concerns, I do hope that the idea of winning a rally actually means something now, and is actually seen as something prestigious, rather than what it was this year, which pretty much had the same value as receiving a certificate for participating. So with the change of point system out of the way, let's move on to the other bit of WRC news, which involves the series doing a BTCC and ditching the hybrids. So in between my Pecco Bagnaia and BTCC video, it was reported by Autosport on the 5th of November that the WRC would indeed be ditching the hybrid technology after all, despite it initially looking like that they were going to keep the technology until the end of 2026. Whilst it hasn't been officially confirmed yet by both the FIA and WRC themselves, it is looking like the removal of hybrids is set to be finalised at the next World Motorsport Council meeting, which is scheduled for the 11th of December. Now, whilst I'm happy with this news, there is one thing I want to bring up with this, which is why have the FIA done another U-turn on this? It should be worth pointing out that back in February, it was announced that the series would be ditching the hybrid technology in an attempt to cut costs, given like with other series, the hybrids have driven up the cost significantly, to the point where the series has been struggling to attract another manufacturer. However, 4 months later, the FIA then did a U-turn on that decision, announcing that the hybrids would continue to be present in the series until the end of 2026 as a result of pushback from the 3 manufacturer teams, which are Toyota, Hyundai and M-Sport, as they claimed that the time needed to develop and build a new car to meet a new set of regulations would not be sufficient enough, and also claimed that all of their resources that they have put for the next 2 years were heavily based on the Rally 1 regulations still being in commission. They were also against the idea of certain aero changes that the WRC were planning, which would have seen the performance gap between Rally 1 and Rally 2 being closed up significantly, to the point where in some rallies, the Rally 2 cars could compete with the Rally 1 cars, similar to how the F2 regulations on tarmac were able to compete with the WRC regulations in the late 90s. A video idea perhaps in the future? Who knows? Despite receiving a huge amount of backlash at the time from fans, including myself, it was looking like that the hybrid technology wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, with teams putting their own interests first instead of the series as a whole. However, 5 months later, and we find ourselves in this situation where the FIA has once again made a U-turn, a bit like a dog not being able to make its mind up on which sofa it wants to sleep on. Never thought I would use my dogs as a comparison on this channel, but here we are. So what is the reason this time why the FIA has gone back on its word? Well, it's all to do with what happened at this year's Acropolis Rally. For anyone who is unaware, the FIA introduced some safety guidelines to all of the teams from that rally that stipulated that if their hybrid unit suffered either 3 shock errors over 15G or 1 shock error over 25G, they would be forced to strip the entire system apart and send it off to the supply maker for repairs, which could last for months. This became a huge concern to the teams, as they believed that this new system would drive up repair costs, with M Sport being the most vocal, with them insisting that the change could cause the team to close shop and pull out of WRC. This coming at a time when Hyundai themselves were also contemplating about their future beyond 2025, with some even suggesting that they could go down the Ford route of reducing their support to their WRC program. This change resulted in the teams changing their stance about the hybrid technology, as although they admitted they weren't looking to get rid of it, they also acknowledged at the same time that something needed to be done about the cost, and if it meant removing the hybrid technology, then so be it. And so we arrive at the present day, where it is looking like that the hybrid technology will finally be departing, and whilst I'm glad to see the back end of it, at the same time, I still don't think it will sort out the series' cost problems. As mentioned in my How I Would Fix WRC video earlier this year, whilst I do admit that the hybrid technology has definitely contributed to the driving cost, I don't believe it is the sole reason, as in my opinion, the main reason why the costs have been driven up significantly is due to the Rally 1 regulations. Apart from the shell, which is the only similarity the cars have to their standard counterpart, the Rally 1 regulations allow for the teams to have a lot more freedom when it comes to the aerodynamics, which not only increases the speed of the cars, which admittedly is a spectacle when watching them on any stage, it also increases the cost significantly, especially when it comes to R&D development, given the unlimited amount of testing time teams are allowed to have. Now granted, these aerodynamic changes have been around before Rally 1 became a thing, as before the Rally 1 regulations were introduced, the back end of the previous regulations, specifically between 2017 and 2021, saw the teams have a lot more aerodynamic freedom then. And as you can imagine, it drove up the cost significantly, to the point where the series ended up losing a manufacturer at the end of 2019, courtesy of Citroën. When the Rally 1 regulations were introduced in 2022, the aerodynamic freedom that the teams had from the previous year transferred over to the new regulations, which, combined with the introduction of the hybrid technology, saw the cost drive up at an alarming rate, especially during the midst of a cost of living crisis. This is why the series has struggled to attract another manufacturer, and is also the reason why all of the teams have had to hire a pay driver in order to cover their costs for an entire season. As mentioned in my How I Would Fix WRC video, and I still maintain this stance to this very day, I personally believe the series should scrap the Rally 1 regulations and switch to the Rally 2 regulations, given how cheap it is to run a car to those regulations, and also the fact that the series will have a better chance to attract another manufacturer, like for example Citroën or even Skoda. However, at the same time, I do understand where the teams are coming from when it comes to being given a sufficient time frame to get themselves ready for a new set of regulations, and that is why I believe both the FIA and WRC promoter have missed an opportunity here. Had they announced that along with ditching the hybrid technology for the start of 2025, that they would also be ditching the Rally 1 regulations for Rally 2 at the start of 2026, it would give the teams a sufficient amount of time, specifically an entire year, to get themselves organised and ready for a big regulation change the following year, and then that way, they could potentially avoid any sort of chaos that may have come if they worked on a smaller timescale. That being said though, them ditching hybrids from the beginning of 2025 is a start, and I hope that in time they can slowly start to phase out the Rally 1 regulations so that the WRC can get back to being in a much healthier state, because right now the series desperately needs it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and whether you believe the WRC is doing enough to sort out the cost problem. Thanks for watching, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, and I will see you next week for the next video. Till then, take care.